Yeah, because
seems like the problem.
it should be a processor thing, not a. All
Okay,
right,
perfect. We did
we're
it.
live
All right,
again.
we are live
All right.
again. Let's start over from the very beginning. Let's take it from the top.
Hello, and welcome once again to Some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I, once again, am your co-host, Buddy.
and today we're going to talk a little bit about the end of the Infinity Saga, Endgame, and Spider-Man: Far From Home. This is our second attempt at doing this with new and improved streaming setup, and by new and improved I mean Buddy changed the settings so it works better. But yeah, so let's go from the top. What were we? What did we say at the top of this episode that was worth repeating?
Okay, so
So
the
Endgame.
the the Avengers Endgame comes out. It is the capstone to the Infinity Saga. I have to be honest. I have a smorgasbord of problems with this movie. It falls in the same sort of place that Infinity War and Captain Marvel do as a bad movie, right? Like I think this is a truly bad film that has lots of core flaws to its construction, right? Though I do want to give it some credit for being like very ambitious, and it does a lot of cool things. And I think that sort of my central question about Endgame is like, can a movie that just acts as like raw payoff to all these other movies, right? And fan service be a good movie on those pillars kind of alone, right? Like let's get rid of some of our like preconceptions of, oh, you need themes and plot and characters or whatever. Like let's just like say all of those things don't matter. What matters in this movie is that it delivers on fan service and it pays off the entire cinematic universe of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Does that make this a good movie based on those two criteria alone? That's kind of my central question here. I think I would argue no. My default is no, but it is like a real thing that I guess I have to sort of wonder about.
Yeah, this is what I said last time around. We tried this, but yeah, I think that both of those things can be true. Like it can be a great cinematic moment without necessarily being a great movie. I think you can separate those two things out and appreciate them separately for that.
Yeah.
Um,
For instance, I think this has been true for all of the Marvel movies. I think almost all of these played better in the theater than they did here. Like I'm reminded
yeah,
in Civil War
completely
where
agree.
like Spider-Man shows up and it's this clear applause moment and like applause line or whatever. But then the moment he shows up, but it's just me watching on my screen, that moment reads pretty awkwardly in a way, and I think it's because it's built for the theater, right? And there's a lot of that kind of stuff in here, and so there's definitely a lot that I look at and I'm like, yikes, this doesn't age well on repeat viewings, but maybe that's like a framing issue. Like maybe I should have watched Infinity War, or I'm sorry, Endgame the one time in the theater, and that's it. That's
Yeah,
all of its value, and that's fine. It's cinematic bubblegum, and I'm trying to make it cinematic steak, you know?
yeah. So that's interesting because I wonder if like you've probably read about more about this than me, but like there's some thoughts about like what constitutes a classic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I wonder if kind of like the ability to survive repeated viewings is part of that, right? Um like I think there are definitely parts of this Infinity Saga that have gone better since I've been watching it in rapid succession, right? Like Peter Quill's arc, I think makes a lot more sense, or Peter Quill as a character, I think makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are other parts that don't, which like the biggest one is Ragnarok straight into Infinity War. It like feels like it's just like a hard gut punch, which didn't feel as bad when there was like 6 months of real time between them, or 8 months even. I think it was a while.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's also moments like that in Endgame. Like Captain Marvel shows up for the first 5 seconds of the movie and then immediately pieces out, which I thought was pretty funny. But also, I guess I get it because I'm sure that these two films must have had very similar shooting schedules. So what are you gonna do
yeah.
with that kind of thing? Um,
I do like how they lampshade it too, where she's like, "Oh, you guys might not hear from me for a while," and then like only comes back in at the last minute to blow the ship up or
Yeah,
whatever.
and the
Um,
other thing is that I do want to kind of compliment the movie on its fan service. Something that both Infinity War and Endgame did, which I felt was very satisfying, was it gave everyone a moment, right? So, if your favorite character is the Scarlet Witch or I don't know, man, Hawkeye, right? I mean, Hawkeye is a pretty core character. Just like like Doctor Strange, right? Like I like Doctor Strange a lot. I'm very connected to Doctor Strange as a character. I care about him and his arc a lot. And if he doesn't have a cool moment, I would be mad. But in both Infinity War and Endgame, there is like this thing where Doctor Strange gets to do a cool thing for 30 seconds in like the big final fight or whatever. And that's satisfying. That's like a really satisfying thing. And that extends forward into some of the other, like Cap raising Mjolnir, paying off uh, Ultron, for instance, is like a big version of this. Cap's shield getting like shattered and broken by Thanos, I also think is like another sort of like cool factor version of this thing. Even the like, I don't actually think in a narrative sense, Tony Stark saying "I am Iron Man" and snapping his fingers at the collection of all of the Endgame stuff makes any sense, right, on a narrative or character level. I think it makes sense on a fan service level because we
Yeah.
all remember that that's the way this all started, was at the end of Iron Man and he says I am Iron Man or whatever. And so it's like it's kind of a moment that is extra textual. It doesn't work inside of the diegesis of the world. It works inside of the context of the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe, maybe. And so like maybe that's enough to carry it and I'm being too harsh. But also like the core story of this is complete garbage and it really mishandles a lot of its characters outside of maybe Cap and kind of like the big three, right? Cap, Iron Man, Tony get real arcs in this movie, right? Cap gets his fairy tale ending with Peggy Carter. Iron Man
Right.
reconciles with his father, which I liked a lot more this time around. And Thor comes to terms with loss, right, by talking to his mom. Um,
Also with being himself in a lot of ways, right? Like
yeah,
that's the kind of the big payoff at the end. Is like he stops trying to be the king.
sure.
Um,
Yeah, definitely. And so there's definitely character stuff going on in here, but then there's like all this other detritus that I think is just it's very bad and hard to deal with. Like for instance, one of the things is that like this movie wants to have a theme about loss and failure, right? Like all of the Avengers have PTSD and they all really, they fucked it up and they didn't win and that sucks. But then the movie is dedicated to them going back and re-winning at the end, which kind of reminds me of like, have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you like got maybe you got like too flustered or something like that and you didn't make the right points and you kind of felt like you lost the argument. But then like the next day you're in the shower and you're like, "Oh man, I wish I had said this. I wish I had said that." This movie is the cinematic version of you going, "Oh, I wish I had done this stuff. Let me go back in time and win the argument," or whatever. But then the movie also wants to be about, sometimes it sucks to lose an argument. So it's like I find that to be incredibly contradictory because it's like, what are you supposed to take from this? Boy, it sucks when you really lose. The right way to win though is to go back and fix your problems. Like, I don't know. That just that was so weird this time around. And also something that I kind of flagged in our last review of this, where I kind of said I think it's going to bother me more that Thanos doesn't have any connection to these people, right? This is 2014 Thanos, who is sort of like adopting the iconography of 2018 Thanos, and were like meant to sort of substitute one for the other. It really did not work for me here. And you could kind of tell, I don't know, it's just like this gigantic, massive contrivance that I think really brings the movie down.
yeah, I mean, the other side of that is that I don't think he had like I never got the sense in the first in Infinity War that he had a close connection with them in the first place.
Sure.
So I don't think that's such a big like I don't think in the 4 years between him looking for the first Infinity Stone and the last Infinity and Infinity War, like Thanos, like that's when he really became Thanos. No, he was clearly that like from the beginning, right? Like he
Well,
was
so
clearly
he
like the
did have the
child.
connection with Gamora, Nebula, right, the
Yeah.
Guardians, and he had the connection with Loki at the very beginning. Like, I agree, for the core Avengers roster, there wasn't much. It's not like
I actually
it's not like Cap and Thanos had a lot of drama. Like even Thor and Thanos only really picked up their drama at the start of that movie when he like kills Loki or whatever. But you can kind of like, you can introduce this character and sort of like make it work. But I guess just this thing of past Thanos showing up at the end of the movie to kind of create a big blowout. I don't know, it just felt so out of left field. And I just sort of wish they left Thanos alive. Could you imagine a world where they left Thanos alive, right? He disappears for these 5 years. Then he finds out the Avengers are working to undo the blip, and he shows back up again, and it's the exact same guy, and they have to fight him all over again to like really put. I feel like that would have just been the cleaner, more straightforward version of this story that I wish that they told, rather than trying to like, play. It's like three card Monty, with the
Yeah, yeah.
with who the
I
bad
think
guy
part of it
is.
is they wanted to bring Gamora back, which is the worst version for me.
Mm,
Is like bringing Gamora like. So I know that this a lot of this falls under typical kind of discussions of nitpicky bullshit, but like the time travel stuff bothered me more this time around. Like, first of all, this isn't a time travel point, but like Thanos' plan, like I always thought it was kind of suspect, but I think like Endgame actively makes it worse because like he destroys the stones, right? But like the universe is going to double in population at some point, right? Like, and it's like one would have thought he had to keep that around to like make sense. But also, something that occurred to me, and not this is like a point against, is that like most of these planets just have no idea what happened. Just like half their people died at some point for no discernible reason,
yep.
right? And like, I don't know, maybe that's like an interesting like Elseworlds type story. But the time travel stuff that bothered me in particular was Loki escaping, right? Like, and like these little moments where like it's kind of hand whipped as Cap went back and fixed it, right? Like and then he like walks forward in time. It's like, and I hadn't thought about this too deeply, but like that means that he couldn't have fixed the Loki thing. In fact, we know canonically he doesn't fix the Loki thing because Loki ends up in his own TV show premiering soon. um
Hmm.
and uh and I'm sure that like they'll give an explanation. That'll get like an explanation because that's like a post Avengers pre Ragnarok Loki. So like it's still like a fairly dickish Loki. Um uh uh but and The other part of this too was dealing with a nebula, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you backfill, because like one of the nebulas is dead, and this is actually a thing that like really bothered me this time, is that shot is so hard to follow, like which nebula kills which. The only reason I could figure, like I had to rewatch it 3 times. The only reason I could figure it out is because one of them is missing their orange head plate, right? And the other one just doesn't have one, which I thought was like that was like again very small moment, but a plot critical one. And I couldn't tell which nebula was dead initially.
Yeah, I think this
Um,
movie is incredibly plotty. There is so much going on, just plot, 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 that it pushes a lot of this other stuff to sort of like the wayside. It makes me sort of fondly remember the Avengers and Age of Ultron, which were mostly straightforward movies, right? Like there wasn't all that much. There were not big plot twists. There weren't like huge puzzles to be solved. They kind of just go from, the setup to there's this whole fight on the helicarrier to the Battle of New York, and I sort of just think that the convoluted nature of the plotting in this piece of the movie really worked against it. Even Infinity War was a little cleaner on this level, I felt like. Which is also an incredibly plotty movie with like a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff kind of going on. At least you have like the anchor of Thanos and his sort of like minions, and it is about his like attack on New York, and you could kind of follow the individual plot threads themselves to, kind of like completion. It was so much harder for me to keep up with the action because they were going from, Tony comes back, he's yelling at Cap, they kill Thanos. That now we're 5 years later, right? Here's the blip. Everybody's dealing with the blip. Oh, Ant-Man pops up, and now we're dealing with time travel stuff, and that splits off into 3 separate narratives that then reconvenes, technically 4 actually, that reconvenes, and you have to deal with like Nebula and Thanos. It's just like there's so much going on, and I appreciate that this is a 3-hour movie, right? So they have plenty of time to kind of get there, but man, did it feel just like there was just too much on its plate to really deliver on stuff. I also think that a lot of these character moments work or didn't work. Like there were like these off-screen things that sucked. The poster child here is the Hulk, which I hated that. I
yeah.
still hated that. We talked about it last week how I hated that, and it continues to be bad and stupid. I am convinced that the reason that they did it is because they needed Hulk to do the snap to bring everybody back or whatever.
Right.
And you can't convince big ragey Hulk to do that. You have to get like a smart Hulk to do that. But instead of putting in the work to reconcile Banner and Hulk, like where it's like a subplot is Bruce has to figure out a way to convince the Hulk to come back out, and they do this reconcile thing, and he can actually do the snap. They just do it off screen. Give it the old hand wave. Um, I also think that the time travel inside of the time travel was just like so many layers deep that I really lost the thread when they went deeper into 1970, and they never quite answered why Tony knew that both his dad and Hank Pym were on the premises. Like, you could tell that he knew his dad was there. How did he know that Hank Pym was there? Is that just a plot hole, I guess? I mean, a very minor one.
I mean, that's where Hank Pym is working, right? Like that's when I think that's just kind of like a fundamental. Pym and Stark were working in the secret lab.
Yeah.
Um, right? Like I don't think it was like a day, right? Like I think it was just like a kind of time period. That works out well enough. I don't think it's that big of a plot hole, like to 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 be mad about.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um,
Um, so it's just like a lot of that little stuff really got on my nerves. I think the end of the movie wants to pay off all of this other sort of stuff that it kind of like fuels a lot of the contrivance elsewhere, right? Like, you have to get the re-snap has to happen, but then you also have to have a big fight. The end of the movie cannot be Hulk snaps his fingers and brings everybody back. You have to have a big fight, and so they do all this time travel shenanigans with Nebula. Again, I feel like the right answer is to just have Thanos and his army, which are still out there, just come back as soon as he like learns or whatever. Maybe you even keep this Nebula stuff. He has like a bug in Nebula's head and she doesn't know about it. And so as she's doing all of this stuff, you have Thanos and he's watching on the screen in his big, spaceship that's still there. It still exists, right? And then he zops back in, he bombs the place. Like, I don't know. This something I keep
yeah,
saying
like
is a good story told well. This is a bad story told poorly. you know?
yeah, yeah. I think I ultimately agree with that. Like there's just and like I think that even the characters that do at least get kind of like their payoffs, like it feels like everything is so like bare bones, right? Like everybody just gets like a couple moments at best, not like it's everybody gets their moment, but they don't get like to be a character, especially
Mm.
like the lesser ones, right? Um like uh like like T'Challa, right? Like Black Panther just kind of like nods at Cap and like plays football with the gloves for a little while, and that's basically it, right? Um and they like highlight him as he comes out of the portal. It's like I don't know, it didn't feel great.
I also think that,
Um
that is another thing that played really well in the theater and completely whiffed at home. Why Cap, or why Black Panther? First of all, Black Panther and Cap. So one of the weird things here is Black Panther and Cap are like very well tied in the comics. Like, they are like good friends, right? Um, and so I kind of get that they have like a thing, but in the context of the cinematic universe, Cap and Black Panther fight each other in Civil War, and then he sort of just drops Bucky off, and we're supposed to just sort of like infer, like, maybe this is more off-screen stuff that I was complaining about in the
I
Infinity
think it's
War
supposed to be like
thing.
off screen post Civil War, he's part of why
Yeah, like,
he's
we
able
don't
to
even
survive.
get a line that's like, "Oh, we've been hiding out in Wakanda because they didn't sign the
Yeah,
Sokovia Accords," or just something along those sorts of lines that would like establish
just
that, well, just off screen, camera right, we have this whole relationship between like Cap and Black Panther. It really just feels like because Black Panther was super popular. He was the most popular character in the 2018, in like the Black Panther movie made $1 billion, and so he gets to be the first one out of the portal, even though it would have made way more sense for Bucky or Falcon or Pepper or Doctor Strange to come out of his own portal that he's making, or Spider-Man, right? Like, I don't know. I just felt like that was very weird.
yeah. No, I like. the cynical part of me wants to say that like either there's like a movie that they didn't have time to make, or like a TV series that they want to make, like it's like kind of like the 5 years or whatever, where
Hmm.
they like go and do all this work, right? Like they get Mark Ruffalo to come along and like figure out how to be Banner. Um, uh, yeah, uh, yeah. I don't.
I've
I
just been
will say that I
complaining
thought
about this like the whole time. This is making me hate it even more.
I do want to say that I think that the big fight at the end finally got the sense of scale mostly right. I still don't think it
Ah,
like
that's true.
hit. Yeah, like this is a consistent thing we've been talking about, so I do want to highlight that it finally did it, right? Like it got it to work. Um.
The
But
way,
yeah,
see, the way that it
that was
did that for me, I think, is it brought back the Chitauri. I wish that they did this
yeah,
in Infinity War. I loved seeing the big squid, guys flying through the air again. Those guys are great, and it's fun to watch them get blown up. And you have sometimes like the dogs are there. I mean, I really hated the dogs in Infinity War, but that was just because it was only the dogs. And then you also had these like big troll guys, and I like that variety, which kind of hit on that like Aquaman level that I keep comparing it to, where it's like
yeah.
I keep seeing stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Oh, like this is neat. Like, oh, I like that thing. That's the kind of stuff that I'm like going for. Even though like all of this is undercut by that contrivance, so it just feels very hollow and very like shallow. Like this final fight just seems shallow, I guess. Um, Compared
Yeah,
to something where it's like more it comes from the momentum of like the story, and it's sort of this like inevitable clash between the hero and the villain who've been set up this entire time.
I think I agree with you mostly there. I think part of it too is that they didn't do a ton of like full pullback. Like I think the biggest problems with some with like Infinity War is that like they did a shot of like the whole battlefield, right, which kind of like shows you how small the battle lines actually seem to be, and they don't quite like they do it once, and I actually thought it looked kind of like bad in terms of like scale wise. But like it's only for like half a second. Otherwise, it's like a lot that's like close, and that gives you like an impression of the scale, which is enough to kind of like let you imagine like your imagination fill it in. Um, Kind of along these lines, I like in terms of the shallowness. I think that like you can see kind of like where like this capstone fails, where like in like the fan service moments that don't work, and I think that varies person to person. The one that like reminded me this time is the like the the woman tableau
Oh
that just
my
kind of is
god. Oh my god. I wrote in my notes a whole thing for this. I was like, this girl power moment is so fucking cringy. It is the absolute cringiest worst thing in the entire fucking cinematic universe. Like, oh my god, it is so hard to watch. I think and the funny thing is that like I feel like I might get chewed on Twitter for saying something kind of like that, but it's like it's not that I don't mind like the representation. I'm
the
very
concept.
happy for like that, but it's just like the thing that caught me this time is that all of these are like side characters and like girlfriends. It's like there is one character in there who headlines a real a movie, and that's Captain Marvel. Maybe the Wasp, right? If you wanna say that she co-headlines with Ant-Man in the Ant-Man sequel. And so for me, I just looked at it and I was just like, "Oh my god, they are showing all of the B-list characters as if they like I don't know. It just I
And
was insanely
know each
cringy.
other either,
And they
right?
don't
It's not
that's
like
the
these
thing.
guys are people are friends.
All they do is share a set of chromosomes. Like that's it. Also, what the fuck is Pepper Potts doing there? Who on earth was like clamoring for Pepper Potts to be a part of like the big final fight scene? I think one of the smartest things that they did in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is they got rid of a lot of these like girlfriend kind of characters. Like look, it's nice to see Natalie Portman or Agent Carter kind of like show up as part of the background pieces of like their arcs or whatever. But like if you're not gonna put in the time to really work on like these characters, why are you including them in the big final fight scene? I just don't think Pepper Potts hasn't done anything interesting since Iron Man 2. Like even in Iron Man 3, she was more or less relegated to the sidelines the entire time. So, you
Yeah,
know.
no, I think that I think like I think they wanted Pepper Potts to be more important than she was, like in kind of in general, right? Like I
Yeah.
think she's supposed to be the wife character, in a way that even like Clint's wife doesn't get, like nobody else kind of gets that like status. Um, and yeah, I agree with you that it's that that felt like more like an attempt to like is that a character in the in the
The
comics
rescue
is
armor is in the comics. They don't even call it that, but that's what it is called. In the comics, there is a suit of armor. I don't know if it goes for Pepper. I don't really know Iron Man and Pepper's relationship. Like classically, they have a deep relationship, but um, so it's called the rescue armor, and that's the name of like the superhero persona. Maybe Pepper has it, maybe she doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like that whole moment is just like so cringy. It's so like
yeah.
limp wristed. That's part of the thing that like bothers me about it, right? Like if you want to make a moment about like, ooh, let's like highlight all of our cool female characters in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I you just have to include you can't do that if the only movie of the 27 movies has been Captain Marvel. It's just like
Yeah.
it is terrible as far as I'm concerned. I will say Captain Marvel. I like Captain Marvel a little bit better in this one, just because maybe I don't know. Maybe the Russos are better with action and they knew what to do with her. Though she does basically the same thing of just, well, I'm a big streaky laser and I fly through a ship and I shoot lasers or whatever. But I at least did like enjoy her kind of like 1v1 with Thanos and stuff like that. So I Captain Marvel gets a little step up from another Marvel movie that I think is pretty bad on the whole.
Yeah, so I do want to highlight something, which is I think they did the Ant Man and the Wasp like that whole like part of that corner of the MCU dirty, right? Like I had forgotten that Michael Douglas only shows up as his younger self, which I will. So a, another thing I want to highlight as a positive is something I realized watching these back to back is we've been seeing Disney's de aging technology mature through this,
That's
right? Like
true.
because it starts and it looks pretty fantastic, right? Like Michael Douglas looks like he did, right? Like it's great. Um, but like you don't see either you think this might be a time where they pull out like classic Ant-Man and classic Wasp as like this is the fight for everything, like you really just like show them on screen for a second or whatever, but
Hmm.
I guess they I wonder if Michael Douglas was even like on set, right? Like did they just like paste his old face on top of somebody else? Because
I was
I could
thinking
believe
that maybe they would. Maybe they did do that. I was thinking they maybe did that with Natalie Portman as well, though. Like she later shows up in a much more clear detail, and I wonder if like is this like maybe this is like edit shots like cutting room floor stuff from Thor 2
right.
that they never used or whatever. But who knows?
Yeah. Um but yeah, no, I like Scott is slightly less dumb in this movie than he was in Ant Man and the Wasp, and then like Hope shows up literally to you know fire up the van, which fails, and that's it. So oh, and also enter the woman tableau, but that's basically it.
Yep.
I'm not a, but this is the personal peeve of Mango loves Ant Man and the Wasp, and
I also
no one
like that
cares about
corner of the Marvel universe. I almost sort of wish that if it was going to be a more dedicated time travel movie, that like it just seems like them going to the 70s where like Tony talks to his own dad, and like Cap sees Peggy through like the window or whatever. Should have just been like there from moment one because I like that moment, but I wish it was bigger. Like I like the idea of Scott going and hanging out with Hank Pym and like having to you know, convince old Hank Pym to do this. It seems weird to me that he went with them to New York, but he didn't go deeper to do the Hank Pym stuff, which is like I guess they just didn't.
so I'm with you here, right? Like he's Scott, or he's Hank Pym's protege. He's the thief, right? Like he's the guy who should probably be able to steal this stuff without
I didn't
a
actually think about
problem.
that, but yeah,
Um, and and they don't even tell him what they're doing, right? They're just like, we're going go back. And this is part of me, like he kind of gets short in the stick, right? Like they set him up as being like an important part of this, right? Because he's the one that shows up without anybody knowing. He's the one that starts this like train of thought about the quantum realm. But he's like quantum realm time travel. That's an idea, and then tells it to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark and Banner do all the work on it, right? Like like,
Yep.
and like he's basically like like less of an idiot, but still an idiot. It's like Back to the Future, guys. It works like that, and that's like his entire contribution to
I
that.
do want to highlight, by the way, because we're on this, that in terms of characters and moments that were done well, is as a Doctor Strange person, I really loved the Ancient One and Hulk's conversation and their like whole thing. I thought that was beautiful and great. If this is that was what I was looking for. If they had done that for of the variety of other characters, Ant-Man, the Guardians, right, in the same way, because that almost felt like for Doctor Strange in a way what you know the Thor moments or like the Iron Man moments are the kind of like a miniature version of that. Here's just a small thing, but like where the Ancient One is like, you know what, Doctor Strange is supposed to be the best of us. Like, oh, warms my heart. And like the way that she like bloofs Bruce out of his Hulk body or whatever, just like oh ho ho, like I don't know. I just think that's what I want. That's like the poster child of what I wished I had gotten for some of these side characters, right? Like Ant-Man, like Rocket and Nebula, who's like, why are they even fucking around, right? War Machine, also, why are you around? I love him. He's great. He's fun. You know, he shows up in the end in like that special War Machine armor that all he does is kneel next to Tony and be like, "No, Tony, no." Um, I also feel like this movie was a lot less action packed than the other ones were, which sucked. Like something that I said about Infinity War is that like the plot doesn't work, characters kind of suck. It's really just like mean and like kind of hateful and just like very dour, right? But at least on like a stakes level and like a fighting level, it's very satisfying, right? Kind of from minute one, right? The fight, like watching Thanos beat the Hulk because he's as strong as the Hulk, but actually has a brain in his head and he can like box was cool, right? Watching them fight Squidward and the big guy in New York with Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and whatever. Watching all of those guys face off against Thanos on the one planet where the other planet is everybody's just like frying the dogs. I mean, I hate the dogs and I think they're stupid, but at least you get like these cool moments of like Black Widow and Okoye 2v1ing the lady with that staff or whatever, right? There just was a lot less of that in this movie. Basically, all of the action was in that final big blowout. Otherwise, where like Cap 1v1'd himself in the 2012
Yeah,
timeline or whatever. Like I don't know.
yeah, that's basically it. I think you're right. I think that might be it. Oh, and he also does the. Oh no, he doesn't. They set it up. They set it up as if he's gonna do the elevator fight again, which I thought was a cool setup. But I did think that was a clever payoff, right?
I also think that was a clever payoff. Yeah.
Um,
So I don't know.
also that was I don't know if you remember, but that was topical, right? Because like he had done that in the comics to much kind of like
Yeah,
fervor,
everybody
right?
was really mad about it, but they didn't realize that comics are weird, I guess. Like Cap's
Well, I mean,
memories had been like fucked with via
yeah, yeah,
the Tesseract, the Hypercube, whatever they call it. The Cosmic Cube is what I'm thinking of. Like the Red Skull got the Cosmic Cube and like went back in time to make Kappa's secret Hydra agent, but then he undid it. Man, comics are so fucking weird. Yeah,
yeah,
really at the end of the day, Endgame reminds me of bad comic book crossovers, right? It bleeds a little too much into everything. It's too big for its britches, kind of. It's too plotty, and at the end of the day, the good stuff that you're there for, right? Like the really like deep, juicy action and character drama is just like kind of not. It just is not there. It doesn't pay off, and ultimately you're left kind of. It's just a very like shallow experience. With something that like Bucky and Tony, when the last time they saw each other, Tony was like, "If I see you again, I'm gonna like fucking kill you." Bucky shows up, nothing. Like completely by the wayside. Which I don't know what you're supposed to do with any of that kind of stuff. But I guess we've talked a lot about it. Endgame. I don't know.
it was appropriate.
Where does it? Do you want to do rankings now? We can do rankings later. We should do our final
Uh,
rankings, I
I,
guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we could talk. We could place where this one's gonna go just because it's Endgame.
Okay,
All
just
right.
for everyone's awareness, Endgame is my second to last, above the first Captain America, which just is the worst one. Bothers me so fucking much. And just below Captain Marvel, which I thought honestly is a painful thing to do because I think the Captain Marvel movie is also pretty bad. But I don't know. And Avengers Endgame is worse. So that's where it falls for me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I am putting this fairly high up there, but that is because I believe in this kind of like theory of it is good or it is good as a kind of cinematic achievement, and so
Sure.
I've got it right above Iron Man one, between Iron Man one and Captain America: Winter Soldier, puts it approximately like seventh for me. Um, so yeah, there's that.
Okay.
But yeah, let's move on to Spider-Man: Far From Home,
I don't
which
have a lot
is
to I don't have a lot to say about this one. I loved Spider-Man: Far From Home. It was like the perfect palate cleanser coming off of Endgame. It is a core, simple, straightforward Spider-Man story, right? He is bucking under the feeling of being too responsible. He wants to just be a kid again. And when presented with that opportunity, he is taken advantage of by Mysterio, who is an incredibly compelling villain that they do just in an insane amount of justice to with his like illusions and hallucinatory shit. Funnily enough, I guess this kind of came out under the cloud of like Alex Jones and like Infowars and stuff like that, where it's like like reality is what you perceive, right? But I didn't get that much of a sense this time. I don't know. For some reason, I just kind of got caught up in like the holographic. Look, he just does VR. Like that's it, right? But I just loved everything. I just loved everything about this movie because it just felt like it was a very core Spider-Man story, right? The true eponymous Spider-Man was on screen. Ironically, the part of it that I hated the most was again this movie relies too much on Tony's relationship with Iron Man, which fair enough. Like it's an interesting plot thread. I get that it gives Mysterio his backstory, all this other sort of stuff. But I cannot stop complaining about the stupid fucking high tech bullshit that I will say though that it was less high tech this time, which is good because it like felt like I won. It felt like the filmmakers were like, you know what? We're not going to give him this crazy stupid Iron Spider suit or whatever. He's going to fight most of this movie in his regular suit. I guess he actually fights all of this movie because he doesn't technically fight in the Iron Spider suit. It just shows up and I viscerally hated it. I was like, fuck this thing.
yeah,
And I had just watched Endgame, which was all about him using the stupid Iron Spider suit. And he's like, activate instant kill mode. I never fucking want to hear Spider-Man say the words, activate instant kill mode. Ah, it's so bad. I hate it. I hate it so much, Mango. Anyway, but that's it. Like it's no more complex than that. It kind of reminds me of Ant-Man and the Wasp in that way, right? Where it's just like, boy, coming off of like the big slog, having a kind of upbeat, straightforward story felt really nice, to be honest. Yeah.
yeah. So I couldn't bring myself to care super much about this movie. Um, I think I'll mostly agree with you on kind of like the fundamentals, but like part of this for me is like I couldn't help myself from seeing just like seeing it cynically, which to me was like this is Sony trying to eat Marvel's pies. Like who's going to be the next Iron Man? It's going to be who's going to be the next big Marvel Cinematic Universe star? It's going to be Spider-Man under a Sony banner, and we're going to push this super hard. And that's all I could see the entire movie, right? Because like I don't know, everything felt a little bit off to me, like almost like kind of like it was off brand. I don't know why, right? Like I don't know why, like I don't know if that's real or not. And like Samuel Jackson and I can never remember the female Shield agents are supposed to be that way because they're telos, right? Like it's but like and like maybe that makes it better in retrospect, but like I don't know, like the kind of like actual but like I just couldn't make myself care a lot, and like I don't know the happy like I don't know happy the happy thing didn't ring right to me, but
I also
I
hate all
couldn't
of
put my
that.
finger on why.
Yeah.
Um,
This to me is just like Iron Man detritus. Just get away from it. I hate it. Don't deal with it anymore. And since everybody and their mother is like coming for Spider-Man 3 or whatever, we keep getting announcements on Twitter. It's like Tobey Maguire and Doc Ock. I'm actually really hype about that one to be honest, because you know how much I like Spider-Man 2. But the I just like want to get away from this stuff with him and Iron Man. Like, so for instance, something that actually really fundamentally bothers me about this movie is that I think Mysterio is kind of correct that Tony Stark was an asshole. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like closet, I don't know, like a socialist or something like that. But the idea that there are these aggrieved workers who Tony Stark like appropriated the technology that they created and that they get so mad about it that they become fucking like supervillains seems like a like hyper capitalist wet dream in a way, you know? And it's just like, man, maybe Tony Stark should not have named this guy's project Barf for no reason. Like, it just seems like he's being a dick. And I get that it's like funny, but like the movie chooses to frame it that way, and I just find myself a little on their side when it comes
Yeah,
to, you know, the framing of it, the movie itself.
yeah. I mean, so the justification is a throwaway line that says that he's mentally unstable, which proves that to be true. But like, it's like, you know, but again, like the part of me that like was chafing me the wrong way is like I get that perspective, but it felt to me like Sony trying to like eat Marvel's lunch again, right? It's like
Yeah.
and Tony was bad, right? Like and
Yeah.
um
I mean, and I like this stuff, right? Like, I like this in Homecoming a lot. Even if like in Homecoming it was very weird. Like, I have a tough time with Homecoming because of the like at the end of the day the thing that Spider-Man needs to do is stop Iron Man from getting robbed. Like, that just feels incredibly off from what you would think of from like a Spider-Man story. Whereas this one is he's legitimately saving people, right? You know, Mysterio is trying to cause casualties because he wants to like, you know, become the next Avenger, which is admittedly pretty fucked up. Um, but just I don't know, man. Like the weird interaction with Spider-Man and Tony has to die. Get rid of it. It's bad. Stop it, you guys. It's like the thing that is holding these movies back. Also, I don't love the high school stuff. It was a little too played for comedy, I guess.
yeah.
I will. I don't know. It just felt like I wanted to be taken seriously as the bedrock of Spider-Man's desire, right? He wants to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, tell the girl that he likes her, and give her a necklace and a smooch or whatever. And like that's like very sincere and heartfelt, but it kept playing that stuff for comedy such that I found it a little bit hard to kind of like connect with Peter and MJ. Even their kiss is funny, and it's funny, I laughed, but I'm not sure I'm supposed to laugh if this is sort of like the emotion, like this bedrock of sincerity for the character.
I know. So I think the kiss in particular worked well, just because it's like it's a teenage romance, right? It's like neither of them knows what they're getting into, right? Like they're kind
Sure.
of like being awkward. I thought that was fine,
Yeah.
but like I think I agree with you in kind of the broader strokes about like the like I don't know like the whole thing where like his romantic rival for MJ's attention like takes a picture of him in his underwear. Just
Yeah.
like
What
what
the
the
fuck was that? And the drone, and he like summons the drone to like that whole bit really did not work. Like he points, "Oh, baby goats," and then he opens the top of the bus, right? Jumps up, shoots the drone with webs, falls back in. Does he close the top of the bus? Do people not realize the top of the bus is open? Like man, I have rock hard suspension of disbelief. But you want to tell me that every single person in there wanted to see fucking baby goats? That none of them watched Peter Parker leap 12 feet in the air through an open skylight in a bus moving 60 miles an hour? Like, what the fuck?
and not only that, but it's played so cool, right? They do slow motion, and it's like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
weird problem of his own creation, right? Like it's I just I just and this is why like I was like whatever with most of it, right? Like it's just I don't know. I don't know.
The other thing is, I really bothered me how much Nick Fury gets duped. Like, of all people in the world to be
well,
duped by
yeah,
something like this, absolutely should not be Nick Fury. Though I had forgotten about the thing with they were Skrulls, so that
yeah.
is a moot point because I watched the end credit scene. I was like, oh, I remember. Because at first I was like, he's pretending to be Nick Fury, right? Like Nick Fury is also a plant. Because like honestly, some of the stuff that Nick Fury says to Peter is so pointed towards what Quentin wants that I was just like, this is also clearly like a hologram. Like he has another person who is like acting Nick Fury and he's getting voice modulated or something. And I was like, was that the twist? I don't quite remember the twist. And then I was like, no, for real, that was Nick Fury. And then I was actually like mad for a second. But like I said, it's Skrulls. Who cares? That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, but that also seems like a cop out in a lot of ways, right?
You think so?
Like I mean, so like you got you're telling me that when interdimensional elementals show up, the Telos's reaction is like, this isn't like a low level thing. It's to call Spider-Man because he can't figure anybody else out to call and not call Nick Fury, right? Like that's just
Yeah.
like a little bit like that's like a fridge moment. That's like a straight up fridge moment for me, right? Because like in the moment, I don't think about it too much, but it's like, wait, if things were this bad, right? Like if like literal interdimensional beings were showing up, like you think Telos has like the balls essentially to be like, oh yeah, we'll just welcome this
This
strange interdimensional being in and
sixteen-year-old is going to be the one to solve it, not the King of Wakanda, not the Sorcerer Supreme, right? Not calling Thor, who's hanging out with the Guardians of the fucking Galaxy, like
not like texting Nick Fury and being like, "There's a thing, we'll try and handle it," right? Like like
yeah.
it's just like that's just like a little too much for me.
These movies really get away with a lot because they play shit for comedy, I think, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. Because you
yeah,
never want
no,
to harp
that's
on it. And it is and because they're making fun of the moment, you never want to like call them on it. But like, yeah, that is a moment that literally and truly does not work. So
yeah.
anyway, but like I said, I really enjoyed Far From Home. The core of it, I think the core of it is really strong, even if I have some of these problems. It ends up for me just under Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and above Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is my sixth favorite Marvel movie.
Right, and for me, it is at the bottom. It is at the very bottom of the good movies for me. So it's right under Homecoming. Um,
Fair enough.
let's for the official record. Let's go from the top down. You want to
All
start?
right, here's my top-down list of Marvel Cinematic Movies. We have Avengers: Age of Ultron, the champ, undefeated. Avengers: Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and the Avengers, which is the upset. I really did not like the Avengers, but boy oh boy, has it really like won throughout this bracket. And then Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as my like top five. Under that is Far From Home, The Winter Soldier, Thor Ragnarok, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I would call all of these good, solid movies, right? That I like a lot. I like these movies quite a bit. The big upsets there are probably the Avengers and Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I probably would not have said were that far up on the list. Then we have Iron Man 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor 2, Hulk, Thor, Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man Homecoming, right? This is sort of my middle of the pack, where these movies are typically okay. Like Infinity War, I think is actually pretty bad, but like the ambition that it has and some of the like the action and stuff like that just like works so well that it punches above its weight class. And I also just like a lot of the drama. Like man, Iron Man 2 is weirdly high on this list, but these are my middle of the pack movies, right? I like them just fine. They're definitely very watchable. Then we have Iron Man 3, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Captain America: Civil War, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Captain America. These ones I think I will never watch again. I don't want to watch any of these again. They are not movies for me, and in the cases of Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame, truly bad films, truly bad movies that are not good movies, whereas the rest are good movies that are just particularly not suited towards my tastes. For that is my entire list.
All
Where do
right.
you come down?
All right. So starting at the top, Ant Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. These are like the ones that I think are like great, like truly great. Then we're gonna go with Endgame asterisk it if you have to. Like I don't think I'd watch this movie standalone, but I think it is a capstone, and I appreciate it for that. Followed by Iron Man, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Avengers, Thor 2, Ant Man and the Wasp, Infinity War, which are like my like you know A minus B plus movies. Like good, would watch again for fun. Then Captain America: The First Avenger, Civil War, Black Panther, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Far From Home. These are my like B, B minus territory. It's kind of like I wouldn't say no if they were on, but I don't think I'd seek them out to watch them again. And then the bottom of the list is Iron Man 2, Thor 1, Captain Marvel, Incredible Hulk, and as the real kind of discovery for me is how much I absolutely loathe Iron Man 3 at the very bottom of the list. Yep. So
Okay.
that's
So
definitely
what
my
are
list.
your
I might try and
overall? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I might try and post these on our underutilized website at some point as like a list. That way we can like link to it or something. But we'll
Okay.
I'll work on that. Yeah.
What are your like big final thoughts on the end of the MCU at the end of this project? Like where do you sort of come down?
I think as a cinematic project, it is impressive, right? Like the series that launched 1,000 other failed cinematic universes, right? Like
Yeah.
I think like maybe that's part of the like maybe I think it's more impressive because like we've seen other studios that have like the might to do it
Hmm.
fail pretty significantly at doing them. The MCU still theoretically going strong.
Even
Um,
Disney, right? Like I would argue that Star Wars is also trying to be that, and like we have agreed that the sequel trilogy is pretty bad overall. At least
yeah,
two or three of those movies are bad, and I mean, you like Solo better than I did.
yeah,
But
and you like
like
TLJ better than I did, so
yeah, it's, like the Disney movies of Star Wars, like its other big gigantic rival property, are not working out, even though they've just announced like a million new projects.
well,
Because I
that's a
guess the
bunch of TV shows
Mandalorian.
because of the Mandalorian. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, which we'll have to do at some point. I think I got spoiled by a Star Wars actor on Twitter about cameo in the movie. I won't say it in case you haven't been, but in case the people at home
Let's just
haven't.
say
But
that I started my Mandalorian rewatch because I really want to get to that. I feel like I'm filtering out Mandalorian pretty well, but I want to make sure that I can get to the end as unspoiled as possible. And every day it feels like a walking on eggshells. But anyway, we don't need to talk about that yet. So yeah, I do agree with you. We have definitely seen like other cinematic universes just like not cut it. Even cinematic universe like like the DC cinematic universe, which I would say is the most successful of the competitors, right, is not nearly as successful compared to like what Marvel was able to sort of like set up and do. Um, Especially when you think of the Dark Universe. I am always depressed that the Dark Universe did not become a real thing. I would have
yeah,
loved to watch those movies.
I feel like I would have loved to have like hate watch them. I at
Hmm.
least would have liked to have like seen what the concept was supposed to like what the crossover concept was supposed to be,
Yeah.
right? Because like you know it could have been interesting. I don't know, but yeah, but that's kind of my biggest thing is that like they have like replicated that connected universe kind of thing that is really hard to do in other places. Actually, I think like basically undone in any other way before, right? Because
Hmm.
even like the TV shows that do crossovers are like for an episode and they're like small things, but
I
like
will say that the DCCW shows do just as ambitious stuff as the
okay,
Marvel. In fact, I would actually probably say that they do more ambitious things in a technical sense. Um, but but that is a TV. That's like a corner of TV, which
yeah,
is just such a different animal, right? Like most people are not watching, um, the CW shows or whatever. Even if it is like all of the stuff we're talking about in Spider-Man 3, like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Molina, or not, and what's his name, Alfred
Alfred
Molina
Molina, yeah, yeah,
coming back. Like that's cool. Um, but the uh the cool the I'm sorry, the CW shows have also been doing that, like Brandon Routh coming back as Superman after Superman Returns, right? You have Ezra Miller showing up as the Flash in a TV show before the movie that he was supposed to come out in, which was supposed to come out last year, has ever even like started shooting. I guess or whatever. Like I don't know. I do think that we are entering an age where things are more connected and are more connected than ever, and that is very cool and interesting.
Yeah. And that's kind of like my big kind of ending thought. I do have a nuclear take, but I want to hear your
Yeah,
summing
so
up
my
thoughts
big
before.
ending thought is I am sad at the way Infinity War, Civil War, and Endgame kind of squander the good stuff in the first half of the movies. The deeper we got into it, the more I sort of longed for Ultron and for the original Avengers movies, which I just think so perfectly nailed these interactions between the characters, right? And really had me believe in their friendship. Um, and you know, I miss it. I
Yeah.
miss it dearly. And it sucks because, like Ultron came out in 2015. Ultron came out like 5 years ago, and I don't think people remember that movie as fondly as I do. And I feel like when people talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe 5 or 10 years out, we are going to be talking about Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And those are the three movies that sort of to me kind of tank the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way. The promise of it was sort of like not quite realized, just because those movies in particular are not great. That said, as it got on, I do think that the movies got better in their solo franchises. For instance, you can really see the difference between Thor 2 and 3. You can see the difference in the way that Guardians of the Galaxy, and even Spider-Man, the Spider-Man movies kind of get like their own, or like Doctor Strange, right? They get to sort of like break away from the mold, which I thought was very nice and like kind of a welcome addition.
Yes.
So even as I felt like the kind of core spine was sort of rotting away in, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, the solo franchises, right, and the individual movies that were coming out, with the weird exception of Captain Marvel, which, whatever, um, were kind of like each better than the last and more unique and more sort of core stories that were built on just quality, innovative, and interesting, filmmaking and writing and stuff like that. So I'm like kind of simultaneously like hopeful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as I am like mourning what it could have been and how sort of the crossover potential just like didn't work, just
So
did not
I
work
think
for your old
ultimately
pal buddy.
I think what ultimately happened here is that there just were too many characters. I think that's why Ultron and the original Avengers work so much better. Is there are few enough characters they can just kind of interact and like,
Hmm.
you know, I think there are too many characters such that these solo movies, which aren't necessarily going to be solo anymore, you're gonna have like minor crossover potential, right? Like Love and Thunder is probably gonna have the Guardians in it, right?
Yep.
Like, and is Guardians of the Galaxy 3 gonna have Thor in it, right? Uh like those that's where you'll get kind of like those good interactions that we saw in Adventures and Ultron, and the big crossover movies are just going to kind of, as the nature of the beast, just have to be fan service porn. Like that's basically it,
Yeah.
which is kind of a shame. But like I don't see how you get around it other than doing like, you know very long or like very parted movies, which I
I
just
think
don't
the
think we
thing
need.
that really bothers me is at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, you had this new Avengers team, right? Tony's not on the team anymore. Thor's not on the team anymore. You have Scarlet Witch, War Machine, Falcon, Cap, Black Widow. And we got that a little bit in Civil War, but that team immediately breaks up, right? And we get back into this like Tony and Cap stuff, and I just sort of wish that wasn't the case. I think I would have liked to see just a rotating cast of who is in the Avengers, right? Who pops in, who is kind of like a mainstay, who is someone that like really sticks around, right? Like you can imagine a world where we got more Avengers movies where the cast stayed at about, Ultron had a lot of people. It had 8 people, right? That's no wait, it had the core three, Hulk, so 6. That's the core 6 from the original Avengers. Then you add Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Vision for 9
Vision,
total. Um, and then Quicksilver
and
dies and it drops to 8. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and I just feel like you could have executed that, right? We could have had a thing where Black Panther joins the Avengers and then he spins off, or Spider-Man joins the Avengers and then they learn he's a teenager and they say get the fuck out. Like I don't know. It just feels like that was what uh could have been, and instead we got like 40 million people in one movie where I don't know, they weren't done justice, and that sucks.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is bad at medium stakes, right? Like, because like you can do like smaller stakes stuff. And I even think that like well, I mean, Homecoming again is Sony, but like, or not Homecoming, Far From Home is Sony, but like I felt like that was like I think Homecoming was very small stakes, which is good. Like
Hmm.
thematically not great, but like scale wise good for Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Um, Far From Home was like those potential stakes were way too high for it just to be Spider-Man, but we talked about that. Um, but like in order to have a rotating Avengers, right, you need a threat that is enough that the Avengers would go into action, but not so big that like you know somebody else feels obligated to jump in from wherever they are. In a way like a way that makes sense, and I just think the MCU has been bad at developing those threats in a way that would make sense.
yeah.
Like the best is maybe Loki is like the localized Guardian threats. Like I think the Dark Elves made sense, I guess,
I think
at that
Doctor
scale, but
Strange
like
does an okay job, more out of
yeah,
expertise than scale, right? Like you get the
yeah,
sense
yeah,
that only Doctor Strange can deal with the dark dimension and Caecilius.
yeah.
That if Thor was there, he would just
And then
get
he also doesn't know the Avengers, right? Like
yeah.
he's got no reason to call for it because
Hmm.
um, um, and like like because even like there like to that point, right? I think you're right, but like that's not medium scale. That's just kind of like media like that's just like specialized, right? Like
Yeah,
and like moving if if that threat happened post Avengers Endgame, it'd be feel weird for him to like not call out an Avenger, or at least like like have something show up to like make that make sense or something. I don't
yeah. I also sort
know.
of wish that we had better crossover. Like this is something, I think Black Panther is great. Obviously, it's my number two on the list or whatever. But I think I would have preferred a Black Panther where, like, maybe instead of general like that's that CIA guy, uh Martin Freeman's character, whatever his name is,
Oh,
he's General
Ross,
Ross's
Ross.
son. Yeah, Ross. Yeah, the agent. If that was Bucky, I think I would have liked that better. So you have this sort of crossover where, like, maybe it's not the big boys crossing over, but maybe Falcon shows up and is kind of a minor part of Spider-Man's story or something like that. You kind of have that with Ant-Man, for instance.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say Emmett is pretty okay. Yeah, yeah.
and so,
Um,
that's like a thing that I think would have been cool or interesting to accomplish. I don't know.
yeah, I agree. I agree. But we're at the end of our hour, but I promised everyone a nuclear take, so I'm going to drop this nuclear take.
Give me the nuclear
Um,
take. Let's go.
the nuclear take is that Killmonger is the most fascist Marvel villain,
Whoa.
even more fascist than the Red Skull, because the Red Skull, like, and this is like kind of like this is deep in kind of like, and there's a large argument we hear about like what constitutes fascism, which is like a long argument that probably not suited for like us to discuss in like super deep depth, but
Hmm.
um like Killmonger kind of embraces like an almost ethnocentric like Volksgemeinschaft kind of idea of what it means to be like what it means to be part of essentially the black underclass, which like um you know the difference obviously with Nazism is like maybe there's like some stuff that's like justified there, but like it kind of like aligns more with kind of like the kind of like n- almost nationalist essentialism,
Hmm.
whereas the Red Skull isn't actually any of that, right? Like he's very much about the Ubermensch, but it's not like based on any part of like any sort of tying German ideology. It's like based on actually being a super person.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing I think this is the more interesting thing to come out of all of that, all this is I was thinking about like well Hydra and Hydra in Winter Soldier is actually a almost a Randian villain, right? It's like Skynet meets Harrison Bergeron, right?
Like
Like
the
he is like
panopticon, right?
well, not even the panopticon. It's like straight up like a communist dystopia, right? Like it's like we are going to kill all these exceptional people because they are too good, right? Which is like a straight up a
Oh, I see what you're
Harrison
saying. Yeah, yeah,
Bergeron.
yeah,
Yeah, which is like a like this is like my shower thought. Right? It's like thinking through all of this because like I've been thinking about the term Volksgemeinschaft, which is something which is like the German. It's like a Nazi kind of German it's like the German community type of thing. It's like an ideal. There's some interesting history there if anybody wants to go read about it. I won't go into it too much, but like it occurred to me that it fits better with Killmonger than with the actual kind of Nazi in the Marvel cast. But that is my nuclear take. Do you have any thoughts on it? Do you have any nuclear takes
I
of your own?
do. That is an interesting take. I do think I agree with it though, and it makes a certain amount of sense. Like, so for instance, so a nuclear take of mine that is not related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but is related to this topic, is that Man of Steel is an anti-fascist movie because uh, Zod is so clearly fascistic, and Superman is ultimately asking for kind of like the will of the collective. Like he's sort of an embodiment of democracy in that sense, because the American military represents sort of humanity and the will of the people in more some kind of sum total than like anything kind of like individualized, right? It's not like he's following it like a dictator, if that makes sense. Whereas Zod is quite literally a superhuman villain who thinks humans are beneath him, and it actually kind of grants him that, and it sort of says that like, yeah, even if you are superhuman or whatever, all it takes is like one dissenter essentially, to kind of like defeat like fascism or whatever. And I just don't think that many of the Marvel movies have really dealt with anything kind of along those sorts of lines, except for maybe Black Panther, where Black Panther is kind of core about the aggro. There's sort of this. Black Panther is like fundamentally about an aggrieved people who are legitimately and fundamentally aggrieved, right? Like it never does the thing where like, it says that Killmonger's perspective on the black diaspora is incorrect. It just sort of criticizes his means. Whereas some of the other movies, right, like we would all criticize Thanos and say, you know what, your Malthusian bullshit just doesn't hold up to science, right? Deleting half of the people in the universe is not going to solve shit.
Right.
Um, and that's not the case for Killmonger. So yeah, I would also agree that the Red Skull is not a fascist. The Red Skull is quite honestly barely a villain. Like I don't know, he's there as this like impediment, but he doesn't have any kind of deeper ideology besides, oh, I'm better and I talk in a German accent, I guess, and that's enough iconography. But he never explains a real ideology to the level that other villains other villains do. I might also say that in a kind of cosmic sense, Ego is sort of a fascist because he is quite literally trying to subsume. But I think at that point you are too high above You're not even talking about ideology
Yeah.
there. You're talking about like metaphysics, right? Like what does it mean to be an
Yeah. Yeah.
individual? And at that point you're kind of breaking down. You can't even really have a fascist state in hypothetically like a gestalt consciousness that Ego is like kind of like looking for. But yeah, I guess I would agree with that nuclear take. So good job, well done.
Sick. Um, yep. Do you have any nuclear takes that you want to discuss before we head into our weeks?
No, I think I've done most of my nuclear takes. I was saving the thing about the girl moment being super cringy for this, but then we talked about it in the Endgame
Okay.
bit. Man, that moment is so bad. Boy, oh boy.
Maybe
Oh.
maybe at some point we can when we're a little bit past we could do like a top 10 cringe
The
moments in
top
the
10
MCU.
cringe moments in the MCU. Yeah, oh my god. Wow. Holy shit.
There's definitely like Wang jokes. There's definitely Banner slamming into the Rainbow Bridge in
Oh
Ragnarok.
my god, yeah.
Like
There's the
um
what are those moment, which is probably low on
yeah,
my list, but I think it would probably make my cringe moments list, even if I think
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
the most minor thing. Oh, anyway, tell me all about your week, Mango. What have you been up to?
So I've been playing this little game called World of Warcraft.
What?
Uh,
How have you been enjoying your time? I saw that you did a couple of Torghast runs. That's where I think what I'm most interested in is Torghast. Have you been enjoying Torghast or not
so
enjoying Torghast?
Torghast is interesting. It is neat in a lot of ways. I think I need to play more of it. Just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like general situation as the keen-eyed viewers might notice I'm not in the same place I was last time we recorded. I'm in a different location, but and so that has impeded my ability to play with a high level of skill. Um, so so it feels to me like the kind of trash in Torghast is like not super compelling. I'm seeing
Okay.
like wisps of it getting better because you're like adding like kind of like if you take too long not doing things, somebody will show up and like try and stab you in the ass, right? Like the chaser mob or whatever. But like it's too weak to be like super like compelling. And the normal thing that happens in roguelikes is that they're dangerous because you don't have a great way of gaining back health. So
Mm.
that like if you screw up in a minor fight, it that costs you down the line. That costs you in the boss fight, which is where like kind of the rubber hits the road. But that doesn't really happen here because you can regen health so much. And maybe this is a monk thing where like I know monks have a lot of like self healing, so maybe I'm the Windwalker monk's just uniquely situated to get past that. But I still find it super interesting and fun. I've definitely been enjoying it. I just don't know how I feel about it in total. Something I will say about the expansion as a whole is it's a lot easier to die. You were talking to me while we were doing a dungeon together about like you care more about interrupts than DPS at this point, and I think that's like a thing that even applies to like world trash in a way that I I'm still having trouble adjusting to. Right, I'm used to being able to just power through enemy abilities in the world, just kind of farm for a while, and you need to 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 if you're pulling any number of mobs, you need to make sure you're on point with your interrupts and neat. And along with this comes like I find death to be a lot more punishing.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe this is I went the Ardenweald covenant, and maybe this is particular to the Ardenweald, but I find like the walk to get back to my corpse to be a slog in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, because I feel like we're used to flying, right? Like a lot of the time, you can just fly back to your corpse on like a ghost,
Right.
whatever. Um, but there is no flight in Shadowlands yet, so
Yeah.
we're just walking, and it sucks.
Not only that, but I also feel like there's less kind of like open air like less areas that are easily transversable or like that are one-way transversable, right? Like
Mm.
again, this might be Ardenweald in particular, but there's like southwestern corner of the map. There's like a lot of ridges and a lot of kind of like tight spaces to explore, which is cool, but it makes walking back to your corpse a chore in a lot of situations. I haven't died as much in the other parts because I haven't been exploring as much, so I can't say as much on that, but like it's
Yeah, I've also
um
felt it with gear. Like Baron is obviously very well geared, but I have alts at 60 that are not as well geared, and so I will catch myself doing things where it's like, well, I'm Baron, I just show up and I pull all this shit and I like blow all my cooldowns and I murder it because I have a bazillion health and all this damage or whatever. But on, like my rogue or even another warrior, right? Um, I just can't. I also want to highlight in the chat that Lou says, "Can playing I'm Just a Girl for a fight scene make that cringe list?" Abso-fucking-lutely. I cringed so hard. We didn't talk about that, but that was also insanely cringy. Oh my god. Boy, that movie's bad. Anyway, yeah, one of the interesting things with Torghast is it got nerfed to the ground, which I was very surprised about, and I think I disagree with overall. But well, I'm kind of like willing to take it. Basically, so what happened is if you're not following the drama, I guess, is on the World of Warcraft subreddit. The first week of Shadowlands, everyone was like, "Oh my God, Torghast is really great. Torghast is really fun." Second week goes by, third week goes by. You're opening up higher and higher levels, right? So the first week, getting to level 3 was not insanely terrible, and once you got a couple of pieces of gear, you could do it, right? Like I was able to clear both both floors of or both wings. God, this is so confusing. Both wings at layer 3. The first 2 weeks of the expansion, which was great, and I had a lot of fun doing that. Then the raid opens up, and wings four or layers 4, 5, and 6 open up, right? So then climbing up those layers, that actually became pretty tough, right? That became kind of a slog, and I was having more trouble, and it was taking longer, but I was eventually able to get there, right? And I cleared both layers, or both 6 and both wings at layer 6 for like the maximum amount of ash. Then this week, mythic rating opens up, and layers 7 and 8, the final 2 layers in Torghast, open up, and the WoW subreddit goes fucking bananas. They go bonkers, because people are losing their runs. People are going through and they're spending an hour and a half in Torghast, and then they die on the final boss. And and they're just insanely frustrated, and they go out of the World of Warcraft subreddit, and it was this intense circle jerk for a couple of days, right, where they were like, Torghast is the worst, what a fucking slag, I said 2 weeks ago I love Torghast, now I hate Torghast or whatever. And Blizzard turned around, and oh, and one more thing, Blizzard buffed Torghast to make it harder, because they were finding that tanks and healers, for DPS it was about tuned, but for tanks and healers it was specifically pretty easy to go through higher levels of Torghast. That was not intended, so they made it a little bit harder to sort of compensate. I was able to get through layer 7 after 2 tries. I had my first attempt, which I think I would have beaten, but we were running up on raid time. I like started at like 5:30 or whatever, and I just wasn't clearing it fast enough, so I had to drop out of it, for raid. And then the second time I went in there, I cleared it in one shot without too much trouble. And then I attempted a layer 8, and I failed out pretty quickly. And I was like, woof, like there it is. That's the challenge. And then about 2 or 3 days after layers 7 and 8 showed up, they nerfed Torghast into the ground. Some of the hardest enemies got super nerfed. They decreased basically everyone's health pool by 25% all across the board, and they said they wanted the intended state was that the difficulty of layer 8 now is the difficulty of layer 6 before, right? With kind of talking about how the intention was you were climbing layers as you got better and more geared, right? And opening like layer 8, like layer 8 is for mythic raiders. Layer 8 is for high level mythic plus players. It's not there for someone who's in heroic blues, right? Maybe they can clear layer 8 if they get a great combination of powers, they get a really sweet build or something like that, but like really at the end of the day, layer 8 is there for very high end players kind of thing. But that like because the raid comes out in the cadence that it comes out, people just weren't able to clear layer 8, and so now it has been nerfed, and I would say that it is too easy. When I was doing layer 8 this week, I was like, this is not hard at all. This is sort of just a slap fight. I'm just like getting rid of everything. I think part of that is that I like I am a higher end player in a lot of ways. And maybe like this isn't the challenge that's built for me, and the challenge itself was for more casual players, but it is like a huge thing, and so I don't really know. I just wanted to give you all that backstory because it's like the big drama in the WoW community right now.
So I will say that a thing that I think is a flaw is that, and this is actually I think a fairly common roguelike problem, is that um the boss is like the difference between the trash and the actual boss is such that it feels bad to like you know stomp your way through the dungeon and then lose on the boss, and it
Yeah.
takes a while to do. Like I think it would be less of a problem if you were in a run that you were ultimately going to fail, you were failing out on floor one. I think another part of this too is that there's no interstitial like benefit. So like if you fail out at the end of the run, you don't get anything,
Yeah, this
right?
really
Like
bothers me. I really feel like anima should drop out of Torghast. So even if you wipe on the final boss and you get kicked, like that sucks, but at least you're going to be walking away with 500 anima or something like that.
yeah,
Um,
and that would also provide an incentive maybe to do it when you don't just want to gather ash, right?
yeah.
Like I think it's neat, but I have no reason to like. I am mildly annoyed by having to. I'm my first set of runs is like it's like so it says like you get 200 for the first level layer and 120 for the second layer. It's like it includes previous runs. It's like oh, so I'm gonna get 320 on this. It's like no, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think
Uh,
it's
no, it does work that way. When you complete
no.
a higher layer, you get
So
everything from the lower layers.
not if you've already done them that week, right? So I have to beat the lower levels to build up to the higher
Oh,
levels.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's like a one-time
So
thing, Like at this
yeah,
point
no,
now, I've beaten layer 8,
yeah,
so I have layer 8 unlocked for every week
sure.
left in
Yeah,
the season.
that is a very minor thing, but it is kind of like like well, it sucks to do those second and third layers because you're doing effectively you're doing 320 ash worth of work for 120 ash, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
and again, not the end of the world, like you said. It's a temporary thing. It's gonna probably be a couple of weeks for me because I just don't have the time or the care to blitz them all up in 1 week.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, it's it's still I don't know. I think it needs like to like if it could tune those two pieces, I think it'd be truly great. But it's fun. Um, yeah, the other mechanic that I'm finding super intriguing is kind of the zone watcher level for the Maw.
Hmm.
Um, which I think is neat. It's also like with the drop with the what's it called the dropping your Stygian souls or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that's neat. Um, it's it it's I think it's good when like you've got some stuff to do so you can like it feels like you're like gathering some significant amount of souls and like really like risking them to go out. I feel like when you don't have a thing to do and you're just kind of walking around and you're risking dropping souls because you just happen to be out, that feels less good. And especially because you can't like farm it super effectively, which I get why they do that. It just feels like I'm going to be avoiding doing stuff in the maw if I don't have something specific to do in the maw, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's
part of it is the value that gets assigned to Stygia and Venari rep. Like, so I've been doing the Maw every day on Bairn, because obviously, like, he's my main, and Stygia will eventually unlock the ability for me to put sockets on my gear so that I can, like, make, that's a straightforward power increase, right? And also, Venari has all these, like, things at the different rep levels that allow me to, like upgrade Torghast, but those are all account wide, right? So I have all of them at this point. But I've been going into the maw every day. The other thing is I've been going to the maw with a big group, right? Like like we'll broadcast in the guild or whatever. We'll be like, hey, we're going to the maw, and everybody gets together and we get like a big, 5 to 8 people who are grouped together, and moving through the maw with that group becomes fun as sort of like a coordination, almost like a raid in a way, but like on a smaller scale. Because so at this point we know the amount of Eye of the Jailer that we get for any individual activity, and we can kind of plan our route. And we're making decisions like, oh well, can we afford to drop in and do this rare? Well, yeah, let's pick off this rare before we head to the next daily quest. And that stuff I just find like interesting and fun. But the maw is not super deadly to me anymore. The first couple of days it definitely was, but now that I'm both geared and I'm going in with a coordinated group who understands like the maw super well, it's not as much of a challenge of am I going to drop my Stygia, as much as it is like am I going to be efficient, I guess, um, afterwards. So
yeah, and I think part of the difference here too is, and I haven't done a lot of it in a day or so, but when I was playing before I was had war mode on, which doesn't have the same. I think you only drop one Stygia if you get killed by a player, but like there are a lot of people, and like actually doing the activity is kind of hard. It's fun if you want a PvP, but if you're looking to just do stuff, it's just maybe I'll come back with war mode off to like actually do.
I kind of love it. I've never done it, to be fair, but like what it sounds like is pretty like brutal, which
Oh,
is
it is.
kind of is like awesome in a way. Like I don't know. I feel like
It
once
definitely is. It's just kind of like if you want to like do the quest to do things, it's just aggravating, I guess.
yeah,
Like there's a point where it stops being fun.
one of the
Go
things
on.
that's nice is that you unlock like convenience over the course of Venari's reputation. So, for instance, she'll have a grappling hook for you, and there are these grapple points all around. So, like, this is something we do all the time now: is we'll Spider-Man across known grapple points in order to dodge mobs or get across the map in an efficient way. And I imagine that like having that access to that stuff will make war mode like much easier. Like, for instance, Venari will eventually unlock a teleporter that lets you get all the way to the north or all the way to the south of the map pretty quickly, so you don't have to leave through that one cave that is just like a bloodbath. I mean, they added the invisibility to make it better, but when it first launched, there was not that invisibility, and you're just seeing people post screenshots of like bodies, like right outside of Venari's little cave, which I always thought was pretty funny.
No, it did. I even with the invisibility, I've seen that, and like I said, it's fun when it's fun, but like when it's like you and like 30 people from the opposite faction and like two people from your faction, then it's kind of like, yeah. Like at that point it stops being entertaining, right? It starts
So
being like,
you went for Night Fae, you said. For mechanical reasons, for RP reasons, like what for aesthetic, did you like the
um,
mount, for instance?
yeah. So a little bit of one, a little bit of another. Mechanical reasons, but not because I thought that like because I thought it was like numerically the best, but like I just like the way the Phalanx stomp felt the best. Everything else, all the other mechanics were kind of like opportunity, kind of like time, pick when you're going to use this because it's a fairly long cooldown type of thing, right? Um, uh, I think that was true for all of them, and but like the Veiline Stomp is like use it when you have it, and then like you have a chance to reset it and just like stomp whenever you can stomp, and I thought stomp felt really good, right? Like
That's cool.
it's like it's a big sound effect, and you put your thing on the ground, and then this nice graphic of, like shoots out from your film. Like this is nice.
Do you have any kind of
Um,
like ideological, this is something that's popped up in our guild because everybody's in our peer, right? Um,
right.
so for instance, everybody hates Bastion because they like make people forget their memories or whatever, and it's honestly become like an out of character thing. Like the other day, we were talking in raid chat about how much I liked killing dogs because one of the things in the raid is you fight like a huntsman character who sixes dogs on you. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd love getting an execute phase with a dog. I just want to execute that dog. And Sarian was like, well, I really wish I hadn't heard that. And I said, well, you're a Kyrian, so you can go delete the memory later or whatever. And I kind of like that in a way, like on a sort of like banter level, I guess uh that those sorts of like decisions I get like react, and
Yeah.
it's not just like a pure gameplay thing. One of the things that's funny is that for Night Fae, like the mechanically best ability for druids is Night Fae, which kind of like makes sense because most druids like want to be
Yes.
Night Fae. For Kyrian, the mechanically best ability for paladins is Kyrian, which also sort of like makes sense. I almost sort of like wonder, did like Blizzard like anticipate this, and they were just kind of like, you know what? Listen, most Death Knights are going to want to go Necrolord, so let's just like buff that one up a little bit, instead of having to make someone choose hypothetically between, going a Venthyr Necrolord versus or a Venthyr Death Knight versus a Necrolord Death Knight or whatever. Because we obviously talked a lot about like the balance of these, like these abilities. Um, so
Yeah. Yeah, to answer your question, like that was definitely part of the consideration, right? Like, I also didn't like Bash, and like the visceral part is definitely that memory thing, but there's also kind of like the kind of like heaven, but actually bad kind of trope is just something that kind of grates on me, as like not particularly interesting.
hmm
Um, and like I liked I liked the Necrolords, right? Like I thought like that storyline was pretty cool, but it's also very much not Billamong,
sure.
right? Um, like Billabong is like I thought of ways that I could like make it work, but like ultimately being a gardener is like much more like a thing that Billabong is about.
Yeah.
And the vent and so when I was going through uh the Ventir stuff, I texted you or I messaged you that I just hated it. And I came around on it a little bit, but that was like so that moment was when I was dealing with like Duke Thanatar, who whatever his name is, like he's
Theatar.
like the first good, yeah, Theodore.
Yeah.
He's like one of the first good guys you meet, and he's also annoying as fucking shit. And I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, I
Um,
was impressed at how much I thought Duke Theatar, the Mad Duke, was I don't know, not fun. Like those kinds of characters you think would be like fun or whatever, but I don't know. I didn't connect with Venthyr as much as I expected to, but I think it is honestly just because it has you do that thing where the game forces you to be a dickhead and then kind of
right.
like yells at you afterwards. And it's not a harsh yelling, right? Like it's not something like Spec Ops, which is like really lambasting the player. Though I like Spec Ops a lot, obviously, because Spec Ops has like a very like laser focused kind of point to what it is getting at, and the way that it is kind of like attacking you and your kind of complicity or whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like I just don't want WoW to be that fucking serious. And it was one of those things where I immediately read, I was like, Lord Chamberlain is such a piece of shit. And I know because I understand, like what's coming in the expansion. Castle Nathria is the first raid, and the Master is the final end boss of the first raid tier. So obviously I'm on the wrong side. And it's like, you, how do you protect against that? You know?
Yeah.
Or even worse, right? Like the Halls
It's
of
so
Atonement,
cluttered.
yeah, like the Halls of Atonement dungeon opens up, and you can fight Lord Chamberlain before, but like you're working with him in the quest. I'm just like, what? Who the fuck thought that was a good idea?
Yeah.
Though, what are you gonna do? I have a lot of sympathy because like obviously like WoW is kind of like it is partially game as sport and partially game as art, and you can't always marry those two things together, right? At the end of the day, for instance, one of the weird things is that the Spires of Ascension dungeon, that was released on day one, right? Like we could all queue into Spires of Ascension as soon as you're level 60, and you learn there that like Devos is she becomes the paragon of whatever the bad guy, this bad guy, um, and is trying to dethrone the Archon. But like when you finish the Bastion storyline, you don't know that.
Yeah.
When you start the Kyrian Covenant campaign, you don't know that. You have to get through like week 3 or 4 of the Kyrian Covenant campaign before, technically speaking, your character learns that Devos is the bad guy, and the Spires of Ascension kind of like unlocks in lore. The same thing is true for the other side, which is an amazing dungeon, maybe my
Yeah.
favorite, but like it just comes out of fucking nowhere. But I feel like those are just like considerations that are naturally made because you're playing in an MMO and you have to be able to play the dungeons when they
Yeah.
release.
No. Absolutely. No, I definitely feel that. Um. But yeah. No. I think I agree with you 100% there.
Have
I
you
do.
have you
I did
played
come
through all the
around.
dungeons?
I think I've played through most of them. I've done the other side. I've done Spires of Ascension. I've done um the one, the Venthyr one, where General Draven, uh,
Yeah.
beats the guy up at the end. I don't. I think I might be missing one then. Um, but I've been kind of doing random when I get the opportunity, because I'm still under geared
Hmm.
generally, so kind of dripping around. Um, but yeah, no, it's been. I do appreciate that. Like, it feels like there's more to, like. I have felt for a long time that playing DPS is a lot of just kind of like, hit your rotation really well and like maximize deeps, and that's how DPS works, and that can be soothing in some ways. Um, and that's kind of also why I enjoyed the raids when I did raid with you guys back in Legion, right?
Yeah.
There's stuff to do, right? And I feel like there's more of that's been brought down to kind of the lower levels, which I'm enjoying. Um, in terms of like making sure like some of the part that caught me by surprise is like it's a little bit more right, like with the bosses, DBM yells at you, right, which I think is useful. I like just kind of know what's happening, but like DBM doesn't yell at you as much for like trash things
Hmm.
to interrupt, and so it's just a thing to learn. Um,
Yeah.
but it's
My
still
number one piece of advice for if you want to be a good player, interrupt. I play with people. I'm gonna subtweet the shit out of a bunch of my friends here. I play with a bunch of people who do not interrupt. And I think that stuff matters. I actually don't. I picked up a DPS meter, which I famously talked about how, oh, I love not having a DPS meter or whatever. Well, I picked up a DPS meter, and it's really nice having the DPS meter. But I actually keep it on interrupts now. I just want to see who's interrupting and when. Um, because one of the things, it's like something that we talk about that's fun is sort of like decoding a raid, right? Where you're like learning mechanics and like specific interactions. And like that's not super true. Like at the end of the day, most of the time you're gonna watch a video, it's gonna tell you all the mechanics. You do the choreography and you're fine. But one of the things that's nice about Mythic Plus is that the trash does you don't do that. So like when we're going through the dungeon, we're learning like what are the trash that we pull, what are the trash that's dangerous, what are the things we have to interrupt on these mobs. And a lot of the times we were like missing stuff like that, but now it's like, okay, well, we have to interrupt drain fluids. We have to interrupt the fear that this guy is going to do or whatever. And really knowing that stuff and making sure that we have it in mind is like that's the sort of like discovery part that is so fun, I guess, to put together. I'm really
yeah,
enjoying Mythic Plus. I think I like the BFA dungeons a lot, to be honest with you. And I think that Battle for Azeroth is where Mythic Plus really came into its own. It was fine in Legion and it was fun in Legion, but like the Legion dungeons were not quite built for Mythic Plus as well as the BFA dungeons were. And then like the special affix, which we haven't even touched the special affix for this expansion yet, but it's just like fun climbing up the ladder, right? Going from a 2 to a 3 to a 4 to a 5 and picking up the individual affixes and like where are the bosses hard, where are they difficult, what are the good bosses, what are the bad bosses, what are the tough trash packs, all of that stuff just like feels really nice. We picked it all up in 8.3 right at the very end of BFA, and it's sort of sweet to be coming into Shadowlands and immediately sort of being like, well, I love this dungeon. For instance, I really like Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain is probably my favorite dungeon. First of all, just on a broad story level, I just think it's fucking sweet. You go to an arena and you just fight a lot of arena combatants. But like on a mechanical level, I think the mechanics are really fun and evocative, right? There's a fight against the Lich, which feels very cool. Like the Lich drains your soul, and you have to stand in like these spectral grabby hands so that it grabs onto your soul and you can reach it again. Fighting the Abomination with these meat hooks coming down and sweeping across the room. Like that's just stuff. That stuff just feels super like evocative, I guess, of the individual like fights themselves. Though Mordretha, who is the very final boss, is probably probably the most difficult boss in all of the dungeons. Like I could relay the mechanics to you, like I could tell the mechanics to someone, and they'd be like, "That's honestly pretty not that bad. You just gotta like dodge this, you gotta dodge that, you gotta account for this or whatever." But like the tough part about Mordretha is that she has a million mechanics, and they are all firing simultaneously. So you do that thing where you dodge one thing and then you get smacked by another, and that's like it's a frustrating feeling sometimes, but I really like it. It reminds me of bullet hell, like kinds of
Yeah.
shmup sort of games, right? Where like I fall into this weird zen of just kind of like, yeah, I'm not really looking at the mechanics. I just kind of have this like intuitive sense for how to move to dodge everything, and that just feels great. I don't know why. That's like one of my favorite feelings in video games.
No, I definitely get that. Um, one of the things that I'm enjoying is how easy it seems to be like good at rando dungeons. Like, like I do have that like that the DPS meter up, um, and like I'll be like sometimes you'll be with like some guy who's like super good, and this is, that's fine too. But like I'll
Mm.
be in like random talks, and I'll be like 40% of the damage in a fight, and it's like what are the rest of you
Yeah.
and it's fine, right? Like it's like, well, what are the rest of you doing? Like, you know, even just for like, reading the journal, right? Like we were wiping on it's a fight with a big lich that calls down a bunch of ice, and then like one person gets carried away and
Yeah,
has to
the at the end
and
of
has to
the Necrotic Wake, you fight the
yeah,
Frost Lich or whatever.
yeah, and that's fun. But the healer, like, I guess didn't read it, and like was like, I don't know why, but like I can't dispel fast enough, and like like, and like I'm just like, why? It's like hey, hey, I think you might be dispelling with people inside the radius, and that propagates it.
Yeah.
And try to be nice about this, right? It's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that, and then we clear it next round. It's like, yay,
Yeah,
it's fun.
there's a lot of little mechanics that are like that. Like on that fight, for instance, when you get taken down and then you fly back up, you have like a debuff on you in Mythic, and that debuff falls off and it creates this big patch of ice. And I kept seeing those patches of ice come out, and I was like, I guess it's just a random cast. Who knows, right? And then the other day, Phalanor, friend of the cast, Phalanor, was like, you have to move that, and I was like, move what? And my ice dropped off me, and I was like, oh, while I am away, I'm stacking a debuff on me, and when I come back, it's a very small arena, right? When I come back, if I'm standing in the middle of the fucking arena, I'm about to lock off everyone, and we're all gonna be taking like frost damage. So I need to run that out to a corner, let it drop, and then kind of come back. And I just like those sorts of small interactions in the
Yeah,
dungeons.
that's like a super mobile fight too, because like the ice you can't like stand anywhere, right? Like
Yeah,
even on like normal like
that is a
like
fight that it
the
feels good. I feel very punished as melee right now. One of
yeah
the things that the greater WoW community has been talking about is called the hybrid tax. A long time ago, hybrid DPS specs used to be taxed because they also had access to a more core spec like healing or tank. So, for instance, an arms warrior was expected to do less damage in a fight than a rogue because a rogue's specialty is damage, whereas an arms warrior can go back and forth between prod and arms or whatever. They got rid of this because it's a dumb idea. But the new version of hybrid tax is that generally speaking, fights are easier for ranged than they are for melee. Therefore, if you are a class that has both a ranged and a melee spec, your melee spec tends to suck. So, for instance, in Shaman, you have Elemental Shaman, who's a spellcaster, Enhancement Shaman, who's like a two-hander, um, melee spec, and the two-handed or the enhancement shamans are just worse because fights are just more punishing on melee than they are on ranged. I chafe against this a little bit. For instance, melee have more regular interrupts, and so if you're in a group of all ranged DPS, especially with ranged DPS like Balance Druid don't have a real interrupt, Warlocks don't have a very consistent interrupt. Most ranged DPS have an interrupt that's on 24 or 30-second cooldowns, where most melee has an interrupt on 15-second cooldowns. You can get really screwed over if you kind of like go all range, and there are other fights that are like mobile fights. If I'm a spellcaster and I have to run away from Comet Storm, I'm not DPSing for any of that because I need to sit still and cast my spells. Maybe I can cast a couple of things on the move, but generally speaking, right, like I don't have that opportunity. Whereas at melee, I can just circle around the boss, right, and I just keep punching, meleeing away. So, you know, it is a thing. It's really interesting playing like WoW now with like I want to play like Mists of Pandaria classic, where it's like it's not so far back that it's like truly classic where everything is just radically different, but it's like kind of close enough to MMO design, but it's just like what does that feel like nowadays compared to what we have in current day Shadowlands. Wow.
Well, one thing I will say is there is so much to do, and like,
Yeah.
you know, I had said that this was I say it true in the past, but a lot of that was like relying on going back to old content to do things. But like, there is so much to do, and I think it's stuff that like sticks around a little bit longer, right? It's not just like one and done stuff, right? Like, there's world quests, there's Torghast, there's your covenant mechanics, your covenant storyline, which lasts for longer than I think that most of the stuff does. There's like a handful of dailies, and it's definitely cool. It's definitely enough to kind of keep you occupied for a while.
Yeah, I really do enjoy that as well. I think the gating on the Covenant campaign has been very nice. Where every week you tune in and there's a new chapter or whatever. It's also encouraged me to level alts pretty aggressively so that I can get the other stories of the other Covenants. So I have a Venthyr, I have a Night Fae, and I have a Necrolord. So I can see all of those kind of like campaigns. Also, I was very surprised how easy it was to catch up on alts. To like get to where I am on Bairn on you know, one of my alts. Story wise, I mean, gear wise, nobody can touch. Like I put way more time into Baron than anybody else, and so there's just no way that anyone's going to touch that. Loot has also been like it is much more rare nowadays, which we all knew going into this because they were getting rid of Titan Forging, getting rid of War Forging, right? Loot is loot. If you get a drop, it is that drop. The only possible thing is that sometimes if it's the right you know piece of gear, it might get a socket. But even then, right? And that has felt pretty good overall because I feel like I'm keeping my gear for longer, right? Like when I get a choice piece of gear, I'm like, this is gonna last me the whole fucking season. The next 5 months, I'm never gonna have to worry about this trinket again or whatever it is. Have you crafted a legendary, by the way?
Not yet because I don't have a memory that even works to my spec. I have like a
Okay,
Mistweaver memory, um, but we'll see.
fair enough.
I have the pieces, um, but yeah. All right. Well, we've gone over talking about the World of Warcraft. Oh, something I did want to point out about Cyberpunk, and maybe we'll talk more about Cyberpunk at some point because there's been a lot of stuff coming on the point. But something I forgot to talk about last week was that it committed the cardinal anti-mango sin, which is you can't rebind all of the keys in the most maximally flexible way. You can't
Ah,
rebind like movement to arrow keys, which is like a big thing for me personally. You
yeah,
can go in the config files and edit them, but it causes problems. And so like that's like that is a aggravating but forgivable sin, but it shouldn't be on like the premier game.
yeah.
And Cyberpunk has a ton of these kind of issues. I do think still stand by that. I think it's an overall pretty good game.
Hmm.
But one I will probably revisit in 6 to 12 months. But it's just that was just the thing I wanted to highlight because I forgot to last weekend.
Fair enough. I also finished
It's
The
ridiculous.
Sopranos this week, and I was going to
Ooh,
talk a little bit about it, but we can hold that. Do you want to do a Sopranos cast? I think you would really enjoy it, and I'm interested to
I
see.
need to I do need to watch it.
Okay, so later in the in 2021, we'll eventually do a Sopranos cast. I have a lot of fucking thoughts about this show, like,
Yeah.
um, so I won't talk about any of that stuff in the back half.
All right. Well,
So I guess we're
with that
done
then,
with the Marvel Cinematic
yeah,
Universe. God damn, that was a lot of weeks.
yeah.
Wonder Woman is coming out soon. We're gonna do Mandalorian soon. I guess
We're
that's
gonna do
about
the
it.
Derpy soon,
We're gonna do
and
Derpies.
we're off.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
We're off next week though.
Yes, because
So
it is Christmas
um,
week. Or no, this is
yeah,
Christmas week. That's New Year's
yeah,
week.
yeah. I mean, it's the holiday
Yeah.
interregnum. Yeah, maybe we'll do Derpies after we come back. I feel like that might be the right call.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. With that, and oh, I should do the exit stuff. If you want to email us about any of the things we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at podcast@spiritsplaygames.com or spiritsplaygames@gmail.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/spiritsplaygames where you can watch these episodes live now. Rate, review us on SoundCloud and iTunes and all the places that you find podcasts. You're feeling particularly generous, you can donate to us at patreon.com/spiritsplaygames. That's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything else you want to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
In that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.